just about forming relationships. It's not just about understanding oneself, one's own motivations. It's not just about doing good deliberative work with other people. But fundamentally, organizing is not only about changing the self, it's about changing the world. And changing the world means translating that insight, energy, understanding into something that actually reorganizes the environment out there. It creates a school where there wasn't one, right? That stops lousy employment practices from happening where they happen. That it makes a real difference in the world and in the environment within which we work. If it stopped short of action, it was very nice, felt very good, didn't make any difference in the world. A way to think about how the world changing happens is through the process of mobilizing and deploying resources. In other words, taking resources that are out there, configured in a particular way, often scattered among individuals, mobilizing them, meaning bringing them to collective purpose, bringing them into collective purpose, like the busboy project, and then deploying them in such a way that changes things.
How do you think about decoupling the two things?
The mobilizing the resources from the deployment of them.
Right.
How many of you have ever worked with an organization that gets a grant from a foundation to do its work? And then the work that's done is out in some community, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens at the end of the grant? Usually, not all the time. Huh?
No more program.
Usually no more program. And what sort of problem does that create if you go and get money one place, it's usually money, and then turn it into work in the community in another place? What's the problems there?
The interests of those that are funding may not be the same as the interests of those of the community. So you find yourself in a real bind trying to address both of the interests. What's
an alternative way of mobilizing resources?
My project is run based on everyone pays a $15 membership fee, and that's enough to cover all of the sorts of copies and things and supplies that we consume.
So what are the benefits of that?
The benefits of that is that we're accountable to the people who spend the money, and the people who spend the money are the constituents. The interests are automatically aligned.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the alternative. That one that Ann just described is often just not even thought of. Or, well, we can't do that. Or, well, the people are too poor.
If you raise money from your constituency, then that builds their commitment to your organization. If you don't, then you don't have this added benefit of their commitment.
So what happens about the relationship between people and power if the resources don't come from the people? I mean, this is what happens. You know, on the other hand, if people are in fact contributing their resources, not only is their commitment deepened, but what else are you changing about a community? Yeah, their involvement in their capacity, right? Because then it's not like providing services. You know, it's like this, you know, the McKnight thing about service or better. Then you're actually creating that community's capacity to take care of itself, and that begins to alter the power balance that's often the source of the problems in the first place. So without that, you know, you may do good work and people think, you know, and it's fine, it's great, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's not reconfiguring power relations in the world. And I think it's really important to look at that, because to the extent that so many of these problems are functions of unequal power. And then, so, you know, you go to somebody that's got power to give you resources to take care of people that don't, and then it just feeds through that way. When does it ever change? Now, you know, in the farm workers, we had the early on, there were lots of offers of outside money. And these are always rejected. And people thought it was kind of nuts, because that was the beginning of the poverty program. There was a lot of stuff going around at the time, and it was always rejected. People paid dues of $3.50 per family, right? This was way back in the 60s. That was a lot of money, I mean, relatively speaking. And got a small death benefit, very small death benefit for that, a newspaper. They could join the credit union. And people would say, farm workers are too poor, they can't pay that. You're gonna make somebody choose between food and dues? We were very hardcore about this. because the whole premise was that unless people had some form of ownership in the organization, then it just was never going to be theirs. It wasn't going to be. It might do good works and so forth. They wouldn't feel entitled to make claims on the organization. Then what kind of resources does an organizing effort need to make the most of? They're volunteer resources for the most part, right? And see, there's a difference between thinking of volunteerism as a nice thing you do on Sunday afternoon in a soup kitchen, as designing ways in which people can voluntarily commit their time, energy, and effort to changing their lives and those of people around them.
We shouldn't just take for granted that in every organization the urgency is there.
Absolutely.
And I
But
felt
what
that
is-
a little bit in the readings. All the people were like very poor, or in the case of Chavez and La Causa, it was obvious.
Well, is it obvious? I mean,
I know
how
that
many
he
of-
used another
No, because
kind
I
of
would ask,
tactics.
how many of you worked in poor communities where there's absolutely no sense of urgency of addressing the problem of poverty at all? Haven't we, I mean, so it's kind of, it's not an assumption that just because people are desperate, that engaging in organizational activity is urgent. It may be that what's urgent is just like getting enough food put together for the next day. So then the question of how you bring urgency to organizational activity, to committing resources to a common effort, how do you do that? It's very hard to get people to commit to action, right, unless it's experienced as urgent. And it seems like part of the challenge of the organizer is to construct urgency. And I don't mean fake it, but I mean put together a combination of strategy and motivation and focused opportunity that it is urgent to act on. Changing habitual practice is hard. It's not easy. And so, but once you start cranking the thing over, then it happens. And kind of what's at stake. Because the other problem with the outside money is that you get that, you keep doing this stuff, and you never have to convince anybody it's urgent. And so the level of commitment that it takes to actually do transformational work is never given. And the experience of making that commitment, acting and learning from it never happens. Yeah.
I think one of the challenges that I've been facing is this whole idea of the fact that it almost feels that a lot of the things we're doing are sort of linear, and we touched on it when you started talking about the connection between motivation, strategy, and urgency. And what I found actually has helped my project. It actually has been one of the things that I've been struggling with the most, is sort of going back to sort of the overall goal, like why are we even doing this? And it's been a challenge for me to remember that I have to be continually utilizing some of the strategies we've been learning time and time again in order to just kind of be able to move forward.
Yeah. No, it's just absolutely right. With the Sierra Club session we had, it was kind of amazing because they've sort of lost connection with their own story. We're talking about where should we have these training sessions that we're going to have with them. And you know, they're used to having training sessions in the Holiday Inn, right? Sierra Club. And, you know, I would get them very interested in stories and storytelling, and they were really getting into the storytelling stuff. And so somebody said, well, we should have a session around a campfire, you know, because that's really where stories are told. Yeah. And I said, yeah, that's cool. And then somebody said, yeah, can you imagine a campfire in the lobby of the Holiday Inn? It's like, you know, well, then what kind of place should we get? Well, what about a camp? You know, what about, you know, and I was like, oh, we didn't think of that. Now, it's not to make fun of the Sierra Club, but it's like right there. But you get, you know, and for those folks, connection to the wilderness and the wild, that's a big deal. That has a whole spiritual content. I mean, it's very important. But it's so easy to get disconnected from that and just kind of lose that, and then you lose the ground from which to get the commitments that you need in order to build a power.
What I tried once was to have, when I got a little smarter, was to have them actually remind each other what their motivations were. So I was only doing that additional work with one person, and then having them do the additional work with everybody else, because I know that I always feel like I have to be a cheerleader because that's my role and help them through it and everything. But now that, well, that's useless because once my energy goes away, then what's left, you know, for them?
Good idea.
No, it's great. And I mean, once you give people license to do storytelling in the way we've been talking about it, it becomes the most natural kind of thing. And it's just amazingly energizing. But just want to challenge you to really think about the connection here. and the costs, the trade-offs in terms of where you go to get resources and what kinds of resources you build your strategy out of. I mean, because if you build a strategy out of money-dependent resources, well, then that's where you're stuck. See, if you think of this as a loop that can either shrink or grow, right? The real deal is deploying resources in such a way that they come back and generate more. And that's real moral resources. And so one of the things that always appealed to me about union organizing is that it's built in. In other words, to the extent that you win a contract, then that generates an additional dues base. And so the more successful you are, the more your resources grow. And so thinking about how to couple success in doing what you're doing with generating more resources, not using up the resources, that's a crucial piece. In the farm workers, we care, always farm workers, but you know, we raised money everywhere we went. It was just built into the deal. It's just like you ask for money and you ask for volunteers everywhere you went. The point is, I think that you preserve your autonomy if you have multiple sources.
Okay.
But you really need, unless your base is your constituency, then you really don't have the kind of, it's very hard then to just do a dance among foundations or something. Then you've got your base there, and then you're in a position that you can leverage other sources. Yeah.
In Venezuela, when we were in the process of promoting the referendum and getting the signatures,
Yeah.
we had 1,000 places where people signed, and in the package that we sent to every place, we had a bottle with a thing. And in those moments, people start,
Yeah.
you know, if I want my signatures to be processed, I need to
Yeah,
help.
Exactly.
And in that period, the organization blossomed.
Yeah.
But after that, we needed to convince international that the signatures
Yeah.
were true. So
Yeah.
we started seeking money international,
Yeah.
and we started finding money abroad. But that's when the organization began to shrink, because
example.
people got disengaged from the
Yeah.
process of doing the work.
And it looks
So
easier.
It looks yeah,
easier.
No, it's
That's what's so seductive about it. It looks easier. It looks like a shortcut.
but it's not a choice.
No, it's
It's a long cut.
yeah, Fred Larson. Okay. Now, in the readings or in the organizing notes, we talk about collaborative and claims-making forms of action, and we've talked a lot about that. I mean, about the difference between power with and power over, and there's lots of examples in there of different kinds of action that helps build claims-making, other that helps build collaborative. I mean, there's the little example, the Cesar Chavez story, mythic first house meeting. But what do you see as collaborative kinds of action tactics that were used in that example? What was he trying to make happen to strengthen collaborative power with in there?
You had people put their names on a card and the amount, the wage that they thought would be fair wage.
Yeah. And so why was that? How does that contribute?
Well, they got their names and addresses for one.
Okay, good, that's right. Exactly.
But then they also had some idea of what people's real interest in wage was
Yeah.
when they went to the growers.
And how does it experience that? What's the experience like that someone's actually asking you to say how much you think your labor is worth when no one has ever asked you that? In a very small way, it's an experience of some agency. So they collected a couple thousand of these. What would be the next step?
You would sort of evaluate the response.
Yeah.
You would say sort of what the average is, sort of what came out of this thing, then you compare it to the actual real wages that they earn,
Yeah.
and you report.
See, it's like how you take these small actions and build into the next, into the next, into the next. But you can do it in either collaborative, like building power with, or building power over. It's just different pieces. And there, as I say, in the readings, there's lots of examples. We can talk some about those. But there's something about getting the idea that one action leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next, and every action that you take generates more resource. See, every action you take doesn't use up, it generates more capacity. And that's really what's exciting about organizing, because capacity grows with commitment, and commitment is expressed through action. I wanted to draw attention to this because the thing about action is that it either happens or it doesn't happen. Okay, and you know, I'm sure you've had the experience of people sit around and come up with a great plan, and then what happens? Nothing. And then, or there's a half-hearted kind of effort, and then you come along with a similar plan, you know, that sounds very similar, and they say, what do they say?
We already tried it.
Oh, we tried that. That didn't work. Well, what didn't work? Yeah, it never happened.
The work I'm doing at the Local 26, I get tired. I feel like I'm imposing on people all the time because I'm asking constantly on their tail, calling and reminding them to tell this person this and tell them that. I'm like, these people are going to hate me. And I don't know, it hasn't happened once yet. But I'm still uncomfortable with it. Like every time I make that phone call. It's like the 5th or 6th time I've called them.
So this is great, because I think in terms of getting commitments, right here, this is one of the key issues. One of the key issues is not intellectually knowing you ought to get it, but it's actually making that ask and doing it clearly and consistently and sustaining it over time.
But the organizer I'm working with, she put me in my place. She said, look, we're not here to service people. We're not here to give them a sandwich. It's not a soup kitchen. We're here to kick people in their ass and get them to stand up for their union. And I was like,
Put all this energy and effort into, like, you know, setting up a meeting, or someone says they're going to come, and then at the last minute something happens and it just never happens. And what you did was just waste a huge amount of time, energy, and effort, when a little effort right at the end there could flip it over. And this thing about reminder calls is really, really interesting, because you know the best time to make reminder calls. Let's say that it's a meeting at 6 o'clock tonight, and so, or 6 o'clock on X day that you're going to have this meeting. When is the best time to make a reminder call? Someone's committed to come, right? But, you know, they committed a week ago. So when's the best time to make a reminder call? How many say the day before? How many say 5 o'clock? Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. So what's this? Just reflect on yourself, right? I intend to go to this thing. Yeah, it's in my book. I'm going to go there. Yeah, you call me a day before. Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. You know, so you plan to go. You intend to go, right? Then it gets closer and closer. And then it's like very close, and you got, oh, God, you know, I have this other thing. And, well, I really want to go. And then at that moment, the organizer calls, says, hi. I just want to remind you how much we're looking forward to seeing you. You know, we have a special seat just set aside for you. And you remember you were going to bring the cookies or whatever it is, and yeah, okay, I'll be there. Come on, doesn't this feel like your experience? It's how it works. And so it's how we work. There's no imposition to this. This is like a recognizing of how human beings behave. And we're not blowing off the meeting because we made some huge calculated strategic choice that in our life this meeting is not. It's like stuff happens, right? And we react to it. And we need, all of us need structures and mechanisms to remind us of what's really important. So many things can go wrong. Why leave to chance those things that you actually can exert some control over, so that you have all your energy and imagination to deal with the things that you can't. You got 2,000 people there in the park. You've got the platform. You've got the candidate. You have the local mayor, the local governor, whatever it is. You got the band. And guess what you don't have?
The microphone.
Yeah. The microphone, or you don't have the microphone, or the plug is going, like, where's the damn plug for the sound system? I mean, I've had so many things screwed up because of sound systems, where, you know, you got a huge crowd there, and you've got some dinky little sound system, and nobody can hear. And so I got educated about getting rock bands, you know, I mean, we would get rock bands to give us their sound systems, because those were really good sound systems. And we knew that, you know, we had 20,000 people that would actually hear. That's where it actually happens or doesn't happen. And you can have all kinds of wonderful theories and strategies and so forth, and it's just not going to add up if you're not paying attention to those kinds of details and really attending to them. See, and I think the difference between people who really do this work, any kind of work excellently, are those that understand that the detail expresses love for the work, for what it is you're doing. It really expresses the value. And it isn't like, oh, these little details, I'm not a detail person, I'm a big thinker, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, well, excuse me, I mean, it's both. Why do you want measurable outcomes? Well, people say, oh, you can't measure everything, right? Why would you want measurable outcomes? To measure success, to measure what else? And what else? Not achieving your goals. It's both. I mean, again, it takes it out of the clouds and it makes it real. You can grapple with it and actually deal with it and learn from it. But you know, we sometimes are afraid of this. The whole commitment thing at the other end, which Mike brought up, which is a big issue, but you know, you need to address the issue of contingency. All this stuff about reminding and double checking and making sure there's actually a place to plug in the speaker and, you know, or the equivalent thereof. It's a huge thing. The coordination piece. The coordination piece. Creating both the roles and the space for management of whatever's happening to happen. Yeah.
A question. What about if it's a specific outcome, for example, affects the commitment? For example, yesterday when I was reading the case of Cesar Chavez, for example, the strikers, all right? Yeah. What about, for example, if I don't know, I'm a father and this is my job, but if I'm a striker, maybe I'm going to lose the job?
The truth is that in lots of organizing activities, there's risks of all kinds. And the risk of being deported is one we dealt with all the time in farm worker organizing because a lot of the people were undocumented. And I mean, it was kind of a choice of like, you know, finding the courage to take those risks or not, because it just wasn't going to happen otherwise. Now, that doesn't mean you don't work to, you know, there's solidarity in numbers, right? You work all the angles you can. I mean, one time they came and deported our whole organizing committee in the broccoli industry in Salinas one time when we were, or they picked them up, the immigration picked them up, and all of a sudden we didn't have committees in 5 branches, in 5 companies. We tracked them to where they took them. They're near Livermore in California, and told them, don't sign anything. And we interviewed with the governor. We got a whole thing going there that eventually we got them permits where they could come back. And boy, when they came back, it was like coming back from the dead. I mean, it was like those committees came back with their permits, and the permits were just temporary, but it was enough for them to stay there through the organizing phase. And it was like, you know, they had like this, like for a vampire, they had like a little cross, you know, you could hold up like that. And it made the organizing campaign. But those are real risks. These just real risks, and you can't kid people about them, but you can do everything you can to try to provide as much support and encouragement. This coordination thing is really making time and space for management and is crucial. It's like got to be the eye in the hurricane. And the one thing you can just not change is that time, because that's what gives you a chance to control the whole thing, time, and then of course outcomes that we've talked about. Last thing here is, this is from Richard Hackman's work. You heard talk before about ways to evaluate an action program. Does it solve the problem? Does it strengthen the organization? Are the people involved actually growing from their participation? Are people learning? And it's a good way to kind of evaluate tactics and actions in terms of how well they do.